And we're back. Number 7, right? This is
Number seven.
Cool. I think we should start out by talking about the plan that we've come up with in some detail for this podcast, because for whoever's been following, we've released these kind of haphazardly. But now we'll be releasing these every Sunday night at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time.
Yep.
So
Hold us to it. If there's anyone out there.
Yeah. So now I guess if you are awake at that time, or you can just find us on Monday morning, every Monday morning.
Yeah, Monday morning commute.
Yes.
Drew and James. We'll get it started.
We'll be here. So that's pretty much the extent of what we should really talk about with that, I guess.
I think a little bit of we're going to be potentially posting a little bit of stuff on the Launch Angle Twitter, which I think we'll retweet from personal accounts if.
Yeah, and we also have we posted like YouTube Shorts before.
Mm-hmm.
We'll just start doing that again with maybe some videos of each of us or clips from the podcast maybe. So look out for that. And I think the more interesting thing about the plan is it's an effort to consistently stick to something and see what happens.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is the exciting part about it.
Yeah, I think beyond, obviously trying to build a following of some sort to be leveraged, in the future. For me personally, like nutrition or exercise counseling. That's a goal to some extent, but I think just getting better at, public speaking, and then also just this motivates me to read more and learn more about different things so I can share my thoughts. So
yeah, definitely. I think it's also it's the thing I look forward to doing each week. It's just fun to sit down and do this. So yeah. So what do you have going on this week? Anything or?
Yeah. Well, I went down to Delaware the past 2 days just to do a little bit of work for like a side hustle thing that I have going with nutrition, exercise. I work for this, really, it's not even I wouldn't call it a company. It's just like a thing that this other guy and I do. It's called GravFit. It's GravFitt. It's ran by somebody named Austin Gravitt, and you can find it on Instagram. He has a pretty decent following on there. But really what that is just a fitness company that's dedicated towards helping like high performers with exercise and nutrition. So just went down there. Most of the work that I do for it is remote. So just going there and working with my boss a little bit to refine some of our offers as well as the product a little bit.
Yeah, and you've been doing that for a while.
Yeah, I think it's been 4 years going on 5. So yeah, it's been a really long time.
Yeah. This week I wanted to talk about, not to bring it back to productivity again, but I did see something that I thought was pretty funny, and I sent it to you. I don't know if you saw it. I had a chance to see it before.
Which one was it?
It was on Twitter.
Was it just an hour ago?
Yes.
I did not see that yet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I didn't open that up while I was driving, so I'm a good driver.
Yeah. So I saw this tweet that just said, I think they used the term strategy porn, which you've used before. Which is a
I thought I coined that.
Maybe they said motivate. I don't know what they said.
Yeah.
Maybe they said productivity porn.
Okay. I really thought I had coined the strategy one.
I think the tweet was, also we'll say it's productivity porn. I think the tweet was, mental models is just productivity porn, changed my mind. And I thought that was pretty funny. And I also think there's a grain of truth to it, because it's kind of gotten to that point with a lot of that stuff, which I know I bring it up because I know we use the term mental models on our website for this podcast, and it's a phrase we throw around here and there. So I thought it'd be helpful to, I don't know, maybe distinguish where that kind of went wrong. I think it's become so popular to talk about mental models, I think it can be confusing for people.
Yeah, why don't you maybe just start with what would you say is your loose definition of mental models to start? And then you could maybe say how that differs from how it's been slaughtered on Twitter.
Yeah, loose definition is a it's like a repeatable concept, kind of a reliable concept, a tested concept almost, that you can use and apply to different situations to make sense of a situation that is new. So one mental model that is known, and the name of it is, or well, the name named by Farnham Street. I don't know. I've heard it talked about elsewhere, but it's called "The Map Is Not the Territory." And so I guess mental models are just helpful heuristics for things, and the map is not the territory. What that means is you can have a theoretical understanding of a field or a situation or a topic, but until you start engaging with it, you don't you don't really understand the ins and outs of it and understand it to its full extent. It'd be like if you looked at a map of, you know, some part of the world, and you had to get from point A to point B, and if you solely relied on the map, you might not know that since the map was created, something on the landscape has changed, and maybe now there's a bridge you have to cross, or there was a bridge on the map, and now the bridge is gone. So you wouldn't know that until you actually got out onto the terrain and the territory. So that's useful to know that and to keep that in the back pocket. But yeah, I guess over the years people just have thrown the word mental model around for like anything and everything they're talking about. And
Yeah.
I don't know how. I think maybe when the application when it gets divorced from application is maybe when it becomes that productivity porn and people are just saying it to like feel good or sound like they're this strategic genius.
Yeah, right. They're tapped in on
Yeah.
what's going on. Yeah. I would say the way that I kind of would define it is it's just another tool in your toolbox for making sense of abstract things. And it's kind of like reasoning by analogy. I mean, is that even, that might be a mental model in of itself. But it's just like a lens for looking through different situations. And a lot of these come from different fields of study in of themselves. Like economics, I know has a lot of them. A lot of the hard sciences like chemistry and physics have a lot of mental models. And yeah, it's just things that are very specific in those fields that can actually, it actually turns out that they can be generalized to other situations as well. Like in economics, I think a really simple one that we've all heard is opportunity cost, where it's just by saying yes to something, you're basically saying no to other things, right? So where do you think it's kind of gone wrong?
Well, first of all, the reason I brought it up is almost to kind of make a pact. We should almost we should start doing video for the podcast so you can see what I'm talking about. But two, we have a wall here right next to where we're recording. We should almost have a list of rules for the podcast, because I think we've talked about strategy porn enough where it should just be no strategy porn.
Yeah.
And we've both talked about this as a thing to like make sure we're not losing the plot too much with what we're talking about and getting too esoteric or theoretical, because it doesn't serve anybody. It doesn't serve you to strategize endlessly and not apply anything. It's
just, it's not concrete, and it's almost like you finally hold it and then it's like sand. It just goes through your fingers. It's like, wow, there wasn't really anything there of use with that. So there's no application.
I mean, I bring it up because I feel like it could almost be too a bit of a differentiator, because for us at least to think about when talking about some things and making sure whenever we bring up some of the stuff that we actually talk about application for anything we're talking about that we think is useful, because the amount of podcasts now and blogs and everything else where mental models is one of their selling points for why you should pay attention to talking about mental models. It's become such a trope, and I don't know where to go wrong. I don't know. It came to prominence because of definitely because of Farnham Street, which is a blog online. Started as a blog, now it's still a blog, but it's also a really good podcast called The Knowledge Project by Shane Parrish. But the term mental models was really coined by Charlie Munger, who's an investor and Warren Buffett's best friend. So that's where it comes from. But in terms of where it got lost, I don't know, it just became so mainstream.
Yeah, I think it kind of reminds me of something that you actually brought to mind for me for the first time a little while ago, which was the just-in-time learning
Mm-hmm.
um, by Tim Ferriss, or he at least covered it on his podcast. And it's essentially you should be doing learning about problems kind of as they come up instead of anticipatory learning. Anticipatory learning can be good, but I think mental models used in an anticipatory sense
Yeah, that's a
don't
good point.
really work that well. You know, it's like
Right.
I think it's almost like this nuclear arms race of trying to collect as many mental models as possible um, for problems that may never actually come. Like I work in nutrition, so maybe it's not that important for me to like be getting these distant mental models from like entrepreneurship. Maybe it's important, but like maybe when I encounter a problem in nutrition, then it'd be good to go through a list of mental models and see what applies, just to kind of change my mindset on things. But yeah, anticipatory in the anticipatory sense, I don't really think that they can be that useful.
Yeah. Yeah, no, the just-in-time versus anticipatory learning is interesting. I don't know, maybe you want to talk about how that's kind of helped you
Yeah,
recently, because I think there's a pretty good example.
yeah, I think just being people that we're pretty type A and we get caught up into this like productivity realm. And I think everyone's just trying to feed you stuff that you should be trying to learn about. Obviously, we're younger in our career and we're looking up to different um, well-known people or like gurus in the fields that we're in. So they're oftentimes giving recommendations and putting out the 100 books that I read in a year, whatever it is. And I feel like oftentimes we have that feeling like, oh, I should read this because they are, which is like anticipatory learning, right? And I think that when you think about anticipatory learning, it's almost more of like a imprecise buckshot, um, where of all the stuff that you learn in anticipation, and you could think about this as like your whole school curriculum, right? I was in exercise science and I went into strength and conditioning. And of all the things that I learned in the exercise science curriculum, I probably used 5% of them, right? So it's a little bit more of a buckshot, it's imprecise. Versus if I'm in strength and conditioning and I'm continuing to see problems come up and then I start searching Google to find answers to those problems, that's a lot more like a sniper shot. So it's a lot more precise. So I think trying to move more of your learning to be like just in time, so it's a little bit more bang for your buck, makes a lot of sense. And not paying attention to what people are telling you that you should learn.
Yeah.
Unless it's your boss. I
Yeah,
think that'd probably be a good idea.
Yeah, well, I'll get super meta here. It's something I just thought about where mental models apply to what we were just saying, which is the one I was talking about where map is not the territory, where to just put it as an example, like if, again, you were trying to get from point A to point B on some unknown terrain, all you had was a map of it, and it looks like there's a raging river that goes through half of it. So you spend, I don't know, weeks learning how to traverse a raging river. Maybe you go through different ideas of different boats you could use or ways to get across it. You spend a lot of time learning, and then you actually get out into the territory, and you get to that point, and then you find out that the river is dried up.
Right.
So it's a situation where if the river was
Yeah,
still
yeah,
there,
yeah.
it would have made more sense to get there and then learn how to cross it versus you spend all that time learning how to cross it and it's not there.
Yeah.
So.
No, I think that's a great point. And I think what a lot of anticipatory learning comes from is really fear, right? It's like the fear of that river. Like you think that you might have a problem ahead of you. So in anticipation of that problem, you're trying to solve it by, mastering a certain concept. But it might not even come that problem happens. Obviously, I'm not saying that like you shouldn't ever be preparing in some sense for problems. Obviously, you know, anticipating is far better than reacting. But I'm just kind of a little bit more against this like overly anticipatory learning where that's all that you're really doing because it's very imprecise. You shouldn't be spending all of your time there.
Yeah, and I think it also is driven by what we see other people doing and other people learning. So
exactly.
just a very human thing to do is to, emulate people who we attach value to, who like you see as being successful. We call it the mimetic theory of desire, if anyone's interested. But I've dealt with it where I see people who I think of, who I admire. I see they're learning to. Constant example I would see on social media is like authors or people I would follow on like YouTube. All of a sudden they're like learning to code or they're learning to do, and I'm like, well, I should know how to like do that then. When it's like I have no application for how I'd actually use that. I don't. It's definitely not one of my strong suits. I've tried. Like, it's not something I'm good at. It's not something I'm really. I sit down and I'm ever like I'm motivated to do this. It comes from a place of just seeing somebody else do it and thinking I should do it because you're placing a premium on their decision making.
Exactly.
In a sense, and that can be helpful. It definitely can be helpful to, admire people and see where they've gone, and if it's a place you want to go, and emulate some of those decisions, but to do it mindfully and not blindly. And a lot of us, I think, just do it blindly.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. And I sent you that that kind of quadrant that I made earlier this week for thinking about it, and it's on the two axes, it's want to do and don't want to do. And then on the other ones, it's need to do and don't need to do. And the way you can kind of think of don't want to do is oftentimes like should do. And so a lot of times we spend time in this zone of like don't need to do, but feel like we should do. And I feel like that's a perfect example, like coding. You feel like you should do it, but you don't need to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Versus the zone of like want to do and then also don't need to do is kind of like that zone of like inspiration, right? It's like the zone where you're using your free time to like upskill and do things that you're passionate about, reading, maybe exercise. Nobody's forcing you to do it, but that's like the zone of like high motivation.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Definitely. And then another note, quick, just on just-in-time learning. That doesn't mean to not learn things that you're just not going to use. Like, if by all means, if you're interested in learning something and you can't foresee any potential application for it, maybe even ever in your life, but you still just want to learn about it, still do that. Obviously, It's just this is more so for not wasting time. Another mental model, like just the opportunity cost sometimes of learning something that can be applied immediately versus maybe you can wait.
Yeah, and that's exactly the thing. Like in that kind of 2x2 square, it's like you do genuinely want to do it. You're not doing it just because you feel like you should do it. So it's really just building that ability to discern, what your inputs are and where your effort's going. Right. Not doing stuff that you feel like you should be doing, unless you need to.
Right. Cool. So did you have a set topic to talk about this week, or you just wanted to keep rolling? Yeah. Did you see in other news what's going on with FTX? I'm not going to pretend to actually really understand, but I do know just.
No, I saw one tweet where this guy was maybe testifying.
Yeah, that's old video.
Okay, and I didn't really know like what the significance was.
I'll explain what the significance of it was. So basically, FTX is it might be the largest crypto exchange. Like
it's pretty big. I think they sponsor a stadium.
Well, yeah, they do.
And it was like the contract that they had to sponsor at one point might have been like close to their valuation because it dropped so much.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's in the NBA or the NFL that they sponsor a stadium, but like Tom Brady is heavily associated with. He's got sponsorships with them. I almost think like maybe Matt Damon. I don't know.
Maybe Matt Damon.
I've seen commercials for that. Yeah, whatever. I mean, but they do. They have affiliations with the NFL. And big company. I don't think they're publicly traded. Big company. So similar to a Coinbase, whoever knows that. Just a platform where the average everyday retail investor could go and buy crypto and store crypto. And so it was started. The founder is this guy Sam Bankman-Fried, and I think he was formerly. I don't know if he was going for his PhD, but physics at MIT, left, decided to see what he could do to kind of make the most impact in the world, because he's also an effective altruist, which the effective altruism movement, I'm also not going to pretend to understand super well, but the general gist of that is it's a movement that kind of automates charity towards the statistically most impactful causes. So the idea is like, don't rely on people to just donate to this or that charity. Instead, make it automated and make it based off the biggest problems. So like, people who take the effective altruism pledge, I think it's 10% of their yearly income just goes to, they give it to this movement, and then it gets, dispersed to different causes.
Yeah. So I guess, whenever I'm at like the whatever grocery store, there's always like the prompt trying to get you to donate to a certain cause, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's like $1, $3, $5. Would like the effective altruist movement kind of say like you should be more discerning about where you're kind of donating to, instead of just like blindly being like, yeah, this organization's good enough.
Yeah,
because I always wonder, like,
I think that's one of their
messages. Is Giant supermarket really putting in like the most effort to make sure that this is like a, nothing against Giant, like
no, I think that's one of their
We're gonna have Giant execs in the DMs.
I think that's one of their messages is kind of just leave it to us. We'll and vet the ones that are going to be the most effective. But anyway, that part is just kind of background information. So he's an effective altruist. He got into crypto because he saw it as a way to make a lot of money and give it away to charity. And he was one of the youngest self-made billionaires. And so anyway, FTX is valued multi tens of billions of dollar valuation company. And basically, what's apparently happened over the last few days is it's been discovered that they were completely insolvent. So essentially, they were using customer money that was tied up in assets that were held on their exchange, and then making all these speculative bets on other cryptocurrencies that have all dropped considerably or gone to zero. So they've lost, essentially, like, the true figure isn't known yet, but at least I think $10 billion worth of customer assets. And so it's significant for a number of reasons. Like, obviously, if anyone follows crypto, that's been down for this whole past year. It's also significant because it's just kind of a shot against crypto again. It's like, not a lot of people trust it anyway. Now you have this massive company that's well known and pretty mainstream at this point, and was engaging in massive fraud, allegedly. And the other significant piece of it is it's sending a lot of ripples through all of crypto, because there's this, people looked at FTX and it was like, if these are their holdings, this is what it means for the rest of the markets. And like, valuations of other coins and cryptocurrencies are just tanking because, there was all this perceived liquidity in the market, and it turns out there's not. So that's why it's significant. And then why I'm saying about the effective altruism movement is it's significant because this Sam Bankman-Fried apparently was into it for that, but then it's like, well, how does something like this happen if the real goal is to give just a lot of money to charity? Obviously, you're running a company. Right. Other people, I mean, it's not just, I'm sure it wasn't him that, nobody really knows for certain right now exactly what happened, but it's just an interesting story.
Is it in some ways like a Ponzi scheme? Or no?
No.
Okay.
No.
Kind of out of our realms here. Not
a little bit.
Finance experts, but
we're not. Okay. I just think it's a very interesting.
It's
story.
very interesting. So it's almost like they're taking a loan out against the assets of the people in the.
The reason that video of him testifying is significant was because he was testifying for Congress, or not. I don't know if it was Congress, honestly. But he was testifying in court just to kind of the trustworthiness, I think, of crypto, and he was citing the housing crash as an example of where tremendous risk builds up in a system where you can't actually see the risk So he was saying that crypto is inherently less risky because you have everything on a
I
blockchain.
see.
You should be able to see the risk. Meanwhile,
And there's fail safes within it.
yeah.
I think he was
Meanwhile,
saying.
their activity has now built up this like insane amount of risk in the whole crypto ecosystem where it's going to. Who knows what the end state of this is, but
Yeah, it's a potential deck of cards.
yeah, I mean a lot of coins. Solana has gone down quite considerably. I forgot why that's involved in this, but I think they were like big holders of Solana or something.
Yeah,
I don't know. Keep grain of salt. I'm completely talking just out of what I've seen on Twitter.
Right.
I'm just speaking because it's interesting. Please don't take what I say as fact. We're not journalists or financial experts, but interesting story nonetheless. Look into it if you want to learn more.
Yeah, if you want to look at James's rate of returns with his financial advice with me on Solana, it's pretty bad. It's a bloodbath. He had me buy at the peak around $210 for Solana. I don't even look anymore, but yeah, hasn't hurt the friendship. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's been okay, and not financial advice. I don't look at my crypto, and I'm just gonna hold it all for the next 15 years.
Yeah, exactly. Hope it goes up.
Forget about it and hope it goes up. Yeah.
Hope it goes up.
I don't think either of us had life-changing amounts of money in it anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the interesting story from this past couple days that I was interested in.
Yeah. So I guess we haven't done a podcast since we absolutely crushed that run on Sunday. That was intense.
Yeah, we did. What was it? So we did 7.5 miles.
Yeah, 7.5, and a little bit into it, I started mixing in some sprints.
Yeah. And for those listening, neither Drew or I are exactly like great runners, I would say. Mm-hmm. You know, we're weekend warriors with running.
Yeah.
3
miles.
At
best.
3 miles here, 5 miles there, a mile, another day. So, but I've done longer. But yeah, we decided we would just go for it and do 7.5 at like a 9:20 pace. Like we kept it slow.
Yeah. You were doing a little bit more running at one point, right?
I was doing a lot of running during the pandemic.
I remember you did a half marathon.
I did an impromptu. Yeah, I just did a 13. What is it? 13.1 mile run during the pandemic, which was so ill-advised. My legs hurt so bad afterwards. But running's gotten easier for me since I've got a standing desk.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's because sitting, my hip flexors would tight my back.
Because you had some issues with your back at one point.
Yeah, my lower back and my hip flexors would get really tight. But since I've used a standing desk, running has gotten considerably more enjoyable.
Yeah, it makes sense. Obviously, when you sit, your hip flexors will tighten up. So, it kind of causes that anterior pelvic tilt. So if you think about your pelvis as you can think of it as almost like a bowl of water. So if you have anterior pelvic tilt, it's like the water is spilling out the front. Mm-hmm. So the bowl is tipping up from the back, and then the front of it is tipping down. So that basically is caused by tight hip flexors, and then that kind of puts your hamstrings on stretch. So a lot of times people will think that they have tight hamstrings, which in a way you do have tight hamstrings, but it's really just because your hips are being pulled. Your hips are pulling your hamstrings further, if that makes sense.
So they're tight because there's tension.
They're taut.
Yeah.
They're taut. It's almost like a rope that usually has slack. And if you pull one end of the rope a further distance, because your hips are further from your knees, basically.
So then it doesn't do any good then, I guess, to do the typical hamstring stretch?
Yeah.
Not do anything?
So a lot of times, and I'm not like a physical therapist or anything. I do have a background in strength conditioning, but what people will call it like protective tension, right? So a lot of times, another example is people's like necks and traps get tight, right? But that's protective tension. It's taut because it's like it doesn't want to be pulled further into that range. So it's actually a problem that's further down. It's usually like maybe your shoulder blades are sitting low, or maybe you roll your shoulders forward. So a lot of times when we look at these problems, it's happening above or below the pain. It's rarely that you just need to get a massage and just fix the pain. You need to fix something above or below.
So it's taut. The muscle is taut, but then there's some part of the muscle, like maybe above, that is actually condensing almost to stop it from fully becoming pulled. Is that right?
Yeah, so it's just tight. It's tightening up even more because it's like it's being pulled so
Okay.
much, like a further distance,
Oh, the
right?
whole thing is kind of tightening up to prevent it from itself from being pulled further.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting.
And that's because typically people have tight hip flexors because we all sit,
Mm-hmm.
and then also when that happens, right? If the front of your hips, and this is tough to visualize, but the front of your hips are tipped down, right? The metaphor I used before, like the water's spilling out the front of the bowl. If you tip it forward, then the your abs basically turn off. And then like when people do like deadlifts and things like that, they have trouble bracing with their core,
Oh, interesting.
right? Because it's yeah, it's just like you're not in alignment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another one is like people all have their shoulders rolled forward.
Mm-hmm.
That's from tight pecs
Yeah.
that pull you forward, and then
I had that problem at one point.
causes problems with the back. And
Yeah, I
things
had
like
that problem when I was in like
Yeah.
middle school and started working out for the first time. And nobody does back when they start working out. They just
Oh, no.
everyone wants to do chest, and
Yeah.
then you end up with these rolled shoulders.
You're just wondering at maxing every day.
Yeah.
Yeah. All this stuff. I mean, you don't need to understand it at a crazy high level, but a lot of these things are happening above or below the site, and it's also just like a tug of war between the front and the back of the body, or the left side and the right side.
Yeah. Yeah, I've kind of been thinking about this too because I got new running shoes today, and maybe running shoes have always been like this, and I've just never gotten really good running shoes, but I've noticed that. So I got a pair of Brooks running shoes for anyone interested, and they have a lot of cushion, like a lot, and it got me thinking about not as much as Hoka's, for anyone who wears those. I mean, those things are really padded. I tried those on, wasn't really very fond of them. But anyway, they're super comfortable to run in. However, I have been thinking about the whole barefoot thing. Like, how, like, I get that it's good for your knees, it's extra padding, it's easier on your legs for longer distances. But how like unnatural are running shoes? I've been thinking about. Like how unnatural is it? It's you're just walking around with these big foam bricks on your shoes, on your feet, really. Like it's so evolutionarily novel. I mean, it's not even 40 years old that we've had shoes like this, really. I mean, if you look at old running shoes, like old Nikes, they're super thin.
Yeah.
So, I just wonder what the effects of these are. Because the barefoot movement, that is a thing, like barefoot shoes, toe shoes. The Vivo barefoot, I know it was like a popular shoe. I have a friend who wears those, and he was telling me like he started running in them. So he was saying if you get them, you cannot go immediately start running in them because you will be in absolute pain for like weeks
crazy
after.
pain.
You have to really work your way into
like
it.
shin splints.
Because you also have to strengthen all of these muscles in your foot and in your toes that you have pretty much atrophied. You can hear other people talk about this, like other physio type people. But the muscles atrophy because of the shoes that we wear.
Yeah, we're just not using our feet. Like we go to the gym and exercise almost every other part of our body. Like I guess the only other thing that we don't usually exercise, like our neck.
Yeah.
Neck and feet. So yeah, you're just atrophying your feet because they're always in shoes, and then also they're always getting compressed.
Yeah.
Right, because it's holding your toes in a lot of times. So yeah, I'm not really an expert in the foot, but obviously the musculature, like you said, is atrophied, and I think that to some degree, the padded shoe becoming even more padded is almost like a response to people having pain still with like the normal shoes. Where it's like as we become more modern, right? We're using our feet even less. We're barefoot even less as we exercise. So we need the padding to prevent the pain. And then like just to go back to what we were talking about, you're having pain in the knee and the hip, let's say, but that thing's happening. The real problem is probably below. Like you might just have an arch that collapses, and then because of that, your knee gets out of position, and then that causes tendonitis in the knee or something in the hip. So yeah, I mean the footwear is super important. I think a lot of people could probably benefit from orthotics too. And then, like you said, just strengthen the foot a little bit as well. There's probably plenty of resources that are far better equipped to explain exercise than I am. But
yeah, maybe this is what we'll talk about next week. Maybe I'll do some foot research.
Yeah,
because it is interesting.
Yeah, there's two guys on YouTube that I actually really like. It's these two older guys, and they release a video every single day. They're these physical therapists, and I can't remember their names. Like the two most famous. Yeah. So
Okay.
sorry, we're
back.
back.
Yeah, we lost the recording.
Yeah. So what I was saying was that Bob and Brad. There's these two famous guys on YouTube. They release a video every day, and it's really good content for physical therapy. Obviously, I'm not a physical therapist, but physical therapist would be a good resource for learning a little bit more about, foot health, foot strengthening exercises, and they probably have a lot of videos on pain from running and stuff like that, because super common reason why people end up going to physical therapy.
Yeah, and we won't even try to. We probably talked for 20 minutes and had no idea this wasn't recorded.
Yeah.
So I'm not even going to try to rehash what we're talking about, but I'm going to bring it back to what we were just most recently talking about in the same vein of strength and fitness is Andrew Huberman, Dr. Andrew Huberman, PhD, Stanford neuroscience. He has a podcast, Huberman Lab. It's pretty good. If anyone who listens to this probably already listens to that or would be interested in it. But he had Lane Norton on recently, which was really cool, and they did a 4-hour marathon podcast about nutrition and fitness. So I'm going to listen to that over the weekend. I'm excited to. And one of the things I was telling Drew was that one of the things I like about Lane Norton is that he really updates how he thinks about nutrition and fitness. He actually had a tweet about it recently where he listed, I think, 6 or 7 things that he's changed his mind on in the last 5 years. And I was saying it's a great quality to have in that space because at least in nutrition, I can't speak as much to fitness. Things become very cemented and dogmatic how you think about things. So
definitely.
Really cool. Excited to listen to that.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to be listening to that in the next few days. I've got a trip to Toronto coming up, so hopefully listen to that a little bit as I'm on the plane and all of that. But yeah, I did say that I tweeted at Huberman when he asked for recommendations of people to have on the podcast. I did tweet Lane Norton. My only recommendation that I've given to Huberman, he asks that question all the time, who he should have on the podcast. So Lane, if you're out there, you're welcome. I kind of put you on the map here. So just kidding. But yeah, no, I really like Lane Norton, and like you said, he's super balanced, which is very rare in nutrition. I feel like nutrition always becomes part of people's identity, and Lane Norton's obviously gotten like a lot of a lot of like flack for being kind of a jokester and kind of a troll with nutrition.
He's got some funny videos on Twitter.
Yeah, which I kind of like. I mean, this is kind of a good way to think about, public figures. If they're getting a lot of hate and they're pretty open with their views and they're getting attacked by people with like vegan with a plant emoji or like carnivore with a meat emoji in their bio, it's like those people are just too dogmatic and you just shouldn't listen to them. Like don't listen to dogmatic people. Listen to a figure that's going to have like nuanced opinions, which I think Lane really embodies.
Yeah, for sure. And embodies it by also being able to kind of laugh at himself also. Yeah,
exactly. But yeah, I mean, one of his big views and one that he kind of changed my mind on is just that like any diet can work for the general population, right? And a lot of these studies, they'll find different results for weight loss between these diets. And if you actually go back and match the protein, like the people that eat the same amount of protein per day, as long as they're in the same caloric deficit, and if you're not familiar, caloric deficit is just you have maintenance calories, which are the amount of calories that you need to eat in order to not change your weight at all. So maintenance calories, let's say it's 2,000. Deficit could be anything less than those maintenance calories, so less than 2,000 calories. So it could be 1,500 calories, let's say. And so as long as somebody was eating a in a deficit and having the same amount of protein, they were going to have the same exact results. So if James is a keto guy and I'm a high carb guy, but we have the same amount of protein, then our results are going to be exactly the same, which a lot of people probably wouldn't expect based upon just how dogmatic nutrition is, but that's what a lot of the studies are pointing to now. There are differences in adherence, though, with like keto being a little bit less adhered to overall in the long term.
Yeah, no, that's a difficult one to stick to. Hasn't the protein recommendations, isn't that highly debated right now? I need more. I say this because I feel like I don't eat enough protein, honestly. Isn't that up in the air now? People
Yeah.
bring that up a lot.
Yeah, so even in non-athletic populations, the protein recommendation is just like too low. So currently it's between 0.8. I think the U.S. is 0.8 grams per kilogram.
Yeah,
but
I think it's 0.8 to 1.
Yeah, but to 1, that range. But even that's typically too low. If you're doing any type of resistance training, I was reading a nutrition book lately, and it's I think they're saying that the minimum is about 1.3 grams per kilogram. And in the past, there was a lot of concern about kidney health if you're eating too much protein, because to kind of talk about the biochemistry of it for a second. So your kidneys filter out nitrogen, and proteins have nitrogen as a part of them. About like 1/7 of the protein molecule is nitrogen. So as you're breaking down the protein, your kidneys hit with this nitrogen that's forced to excrete. So when people have chronic kidney disease and they have to go for dialysis, a lot of what that is excreting their nitrogen for them using a machine. So we had this thought in nutrition for a number of years, which was starting to get debunked, that, oh, these people have trouble with nitrogen and they need it to be excreted through dialysis. So that means that for the general population, it's probably bad to have a ton of protein, which we're now finding out over the past few years, like up to 3 grams per kilogram, even during like 6-month or even year-long trials, does not seem to affect kidney health, which is pretty big, because there's a lot of like fear mongering around protein. Even, I mean, not as much around compared to like carbs and fat, with the low carb camp and the high carb camp, vegan camp, vegetarian camp.
I'm sure protein will come under scrutiny eventually.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's still like the aspect of meats have different quantities of fat with them. Some of them being more saturated fat, red meat, for example. But yeah, I mean, the protein in of itself, it's not like anything else. It's not really going to hurt you.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. I did the calculations, and it looks like I should, based off that 1.3 gram per kilogram recommendation, I should be eating about 105 grams of protein, which I'm definitely not eating during the day. So
yeah, and I think that was the lower end. I think it was 1.2 or 1.3. I know
it was 1.3 for even just a regular, your average American, so like taking into account activity levels.
I think less so for an average American that's not doing any resistance training. Because basically when you're resistance training, like as everyone knows, you're breaking down the muscle. So that's net protein breakdown, and that's always in balance with net protein synthesis, right? So it's basically breakdown versus synthesis. If you're breaking down more of your muscle, you have to have more protein in order to increase that protein synthesis and lay down more muscle. So basically your protein requirements are higher.
Right.
Yeah, to make up for the muscle that you're breaking down and you're building up.
Okay.
Yeah. So a normal person that's kind of couch potato and doesn't resistance train, not as high of protein requirements, but I know even some of the Scandinavian countries, like they recommend 1.2, I think, for just general population, just for health. I mean, there's no downside when you think about it. With the kidney things out of the way, as long as you're not eating so much protein that it's displacing other valuable calories that might have, vitamins and minerals, there's no real downside. I mean, we have a obesity epidemic, obviously, and if you increase your protein, you're going to be a little bit more satiated.
Yeah.
Meaning you're going to be a little bit fuller after your meals, which I think probably help.
Yeah.
Yeah, because these ultra palatable, highly processed foods you can eat infinite amount of chips, right? It's because there's no protein in it. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, that's something I need to do a better job of is protein intake. I've remarked before, I feel like I go to the grocery store every day. I mean, I pretty much buy exclusively just whole foods. I don't think I have any snacks really, but
James is one of the healthiest eaters I've been around.
Yeah, but it's almost out of laziness because I don't know. I would buy snacks. I just don't even know what to buy. And that sounds dumb. Like I was thinking just grab a bag of chips, but it's like I'm not gonna grab a bag of chips. Like
yeah.
I'm a sucker for any health food store that has fancy snacks that
give me that $6 cold brew with lion's mane in it.
If you sell $7 bottled coffee that has L-theanine in it and like 10 grams of protein, and then you also sell, I don't know, gluten-free brownie bites with adaptogens and 6 grams of protein per ball, I'll just give you money endlessly. Like I'm that.
Here's my credit card.
Yeah, I walk into any of those health food stores and I buy all that stuff. Which is obviously not very efficient and very expensive.
Not advocating for that.
Yeah, I'm not really advocating for that because I think it's a bad strategy. And a lot of that stuff you can just make at home if you get the ingredients. And I'm definitely not advocating for buying $7 fancy like coffee that promises like one small benefit, or any of these other like snacks. But yeah, a lot of that stuff you can make at home. But I should just do it because I'm not eating. I whenever there's a lot of friction between me and eating because it's all with whole foods. Like I just took out chicken that I had frozen and I have to wait for it to defrost. And probably when we get done with this podcast, I'll throw it in the microwave because I got to do a whole thing with it. So it is difficult to eat that much protein.
Yeah,
and it's no wonder people don't probably why people fall under because obviously like I'm aware of it and I still fall under it most of the time.
Yeah, and I mean protein is typically the most expensive nutrient too.
Yeah.
So when you think about it, like meat, I mean eggs are a little bit cheaper,
Right.
but compared to some of these convenience foods, like I mean if you get like fries from McDonald's, like what are they, $1.50? I don't even know,
maybe.
But like anything with meat is going to be more expensive.
Yeah. How does plant protein stack up? Because I know, is there? Oh, this is actually pretty funny. You'll like this. I was, if you've listened up to this point, we're fans of the All In podcast, and one of the guys on the All In podcast is David Friedberg, and I was on Friedberg's Twitter the other day, or I just Googled him. I was like, what comes up when you Google Friedberg? I'm like, I want to know more of his background. And I found his Quora, where he would go and answer questions. He hasn't answered a question in over 12 years. So I found all these old questions that he just answered on Quora. So it's pretty cool if you just look at it. He's got like 17 of them. And one of the questions was about plant protein. And I think he's a vegan or vegetarian.
I think so, yeah.
And his answer was, there was some question about plant protein, and his answer was that quinoa is literally the greatest food ever because it has, I think he was saying, the whole, like the complete amino acid profile.
It is a complete protein.
I think he was saying NASA has actually listed it as like an essential food for, I think they give it to astronauts when they go up there into space.
Maybe because it's more shelf stable than
we'll see. We'll see. I have quinoa on the shelf. And I'm trying to cook it after this.
I mean, you'd have to refrigerate meat versus quinoa can sit on a shelf. So I guess that would make sense. But yeah, it is a complete protein.
Yeah, but how does that work? Is that one of the only complete plant proteins? Because maybe it'd be helpful to explain to people what complete protein even means.
Yeah.
Complete amino acid profile really is what we're talking about.
Yeah, so definitely hop in here because you're the biochemistry warlord over here. But there is 20 amino acids, and 9 of them are essential in the diet. I think
9.
3 of them are conditionally essential, where there are some disease states and conditions where you need more of them because you have trouble metabolizing others. So there's 9 of them, and essentially, if a food has all 9, of the amino acids, it's said to be a complete protein. Whereas there's a lot of plant proteins that don't have all 9 essential amino acids. Like I think soy is not a complete protein because it's lacking methionine, if I'm not mistaken. But
isn't there also, can't you combine certain plant foods and then can't the synergy of certain amino acids be used as derivatives to create the essential amino acid? Is that?
Yeah, it's almost like a Venn diagram, right?
Yeah.
So it's like a complementary protein.
Yeah.
I think rice and beans is an example where you can get all of the essential amino acids.
Yeah, there's like an evolutionary example of like why certain food groups and plant groups. This is like I think the point that advocates for, vegan diets and things like that is if you look at just what people in different parts of the world eat who aren't, haven't really been. You can still find there's certain, hunter-gatherer societies in the world who haven't really been influenced by kind of like the industrial world and industrial food. They still, just gather their food or farm their food, whatever. I think you'll find like people the world over have come to kind of natural combinations of certain plant food groups.
Yeah.
And the thing behind it is like we just through trial and error over however many years of human evolution came to these meals because it's what worked.
Interesting.
And the reason
when you break them out.
And the reason when you break it down is because when combined they form this complete amino acid profile.
Make sure you don't have deficiencies in any of them. Right. Yeah. No, that makes sense. And yeah, I think the research is still kind of evolving, but I think essentially where it stands right now is that eating animal proteins is slightly better than plant proteins. But the big consideration is like as long as you're eating enough total protein. So you might need just a little bit more plant protein because the quality is a little bit lower. But it's especially important if you're at like the low end of the range. Like if you're at that 1.3 amount and you're getting it from plant protein, like you'd probably benefit from kicking it up a little bit higher, maybe 1.5, 1.6. That's my understanding of it. And the other consideration is potentially using supplements to attain that plant protein, like a soy protein powder or a blend that has all of those different proteins together to kind of create that complementary protein. Because you have to consider too that a lot of times plant proteins aren't as protein dense calorically, right? Like if you have a chicken breast, it's like
conversation's making me hungry.
Yeah.
Continue.
If you have a chicken breast, it's like almost all protein versus, other examples like quinoa, it's high in carbs, which obviously carbs aren't bad, but if you're going to get all of your protein in the day.
Drew Drummond says carbs aren't bad.
Yeah.
Front page news. Loses his job tomorrow.
Yeah, no, I'm getting a raise tomorrow because that. Yeah, I mean, you can't get all of your protein. You said what? 105 grams you need?
For me.
Yeah, 105 grams of protein from quinoa would just be insane.
Well, yeah, you
have
the fiber content.
Tubs.
You wouldn't be able to do it.
Yeah, you'd be dying.
Yeah. Interesting. So, what brings up other points? What's the deal with protein powder?
Yeah,
Talk to us about it.
I mean,
everyone rails on. This is something where the first time I heard it was health class, where protein shakes and all that stuff, it doesn't absorb fully or whatever. And I've just taken it as the rule since then, and I've never looked into it.
Okay.
So
protein. First of all,
break it down.
The biggest thing is total protein of the day. That's the most important thing. Timing is distant secondary thing when it comes to protein. And a good person to look at in terms of research and reviews on this is Alan Argonne. He talks about this a lot. So number one thing is how much protein you're getting in the day. That's the most important. So if a protein supplement helps you to reach a higher level of protein to get closer to your needs, very convenient option, right? You just throw in some water or milk and throw in some powder. So from that standpoint, I think it's a great convenient option. It's also not super expensive. The one thing that I would say my one disclaimer with any supplements is look for NSF certified supplements. That basically just means that they've been tested to check for banned substances, which is super important. Supplement industry is very sketchy, so it's important to make sure that there's not any crazy stuff in your supplements.
Yeah. And just a quick thing on that is you can also find there's a lot of reputable supplement companies will voluntarily get third-party testing, so I think you can also look for companies that do that. So
yeah, I mean,
not that it's a proxy for NSF. I obviously look for the NSF certified stuff if you're going to. But.
Yeah, I mean, as a sports dietitian.
Well, I guess if you're a competing athlete, does it matter as much with a regular person? I guess you don't want to be taking substances that you don't know are in the protein, but.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is like some of these things are pretty sketchy.
Okay.
Like there are, not to be a fear monger at all, but there have been instances of like pre-workouts with, for example, yohimbe, which is like African tree bark. It's like a aphrodisiac that's like a stimulant, and it's landed people in the hospital. And and then I think that they look through like a bunch of products on GNC shelves, which not necessarily like just GNC, other supplement stores would have the same thing, but it was like a scary number of them had like amphetamines in them, or yes, amphetamine-like structures. So, I mean, it's not going to lose you unless you get drug tested, potentially, it's not going to lose you your job like it would a professional athlete. Mm-hmm. But I would say this stuff is really important for us. I've spent probably 10% of my job, and just like other sports dietitians, 10% of our jobs, like making sure that athletes aren't having banned ingredients in these supplements, because it is really sketchy.
Interesting. Well, that's good to know. I don't really take too many supplements. I take fish oil. None of this is medical advice.
Yeah.
But I take fish oil, and I'm probiotic. And I also take a Paul Stamets reishi mushroom capsule.
Yeah.
Interesting thing about mushrooms, the mushroom supplements, for anybody interested, I know these have become pretty hot over the last couple of years. You've got like Four Sigmatic, the coffee that has different types of mushrooms in it. And it's just kind of the hot new superfood, and has been for a while now, actually, that people are just adding to things. But something I learned was that you have to be careful with mushroom supplements. You want to get U.S. organic grown mushrooms, because otherwise a lot of mushrooms will come from other parts of the world and they might not, if they're not organic, or if they have a kind of, a sketchy organic certification that you can't be sure of. They could have been grown, with all sorts of whatever chemicals in the area, but also smog is the big one, because if there's heavy air pollution in the area, mushrooms, I don't know why, and I don't know if this varies by the mushroom, but are very absorbent of a lot of that stuff. So then you can end up with these supplements that are just loaded with other stuff just by happenstance of where they were growing.
Interesting.
If the growing conditions weren't, monitored and, properly tended to. So that's what, plug Paul Stamets. He's not a sponsor. What could be if he wants to be. But
Paul, if you're listening.
I can't remember if you just Google his name, but I can't remember what the name of this company is, but they sell all sorts of like certified organic mushroom supplements that are pretty good. So I think we'll wrap there today. This was kind of a grab bag, one of a whole bunch of different stuff, but we hope everyone's enjoying it. We have a schedule now, like we said at the beginning, Sundays, 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. These will be coming out on all of your favorite podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, I think Overcast as well, Amazon Music.
YouTube.
And YouTube. Yeah, YouTube is where we put this as well. We don't have video right now. I think we might do video in the future, because it could be cool, whether that's us doing Zoom or videos of us actually just sitting here, I think would be cool for people. But for now, we just have these thumbnails that we edit for each video. But that's where you can find it. And yeah, I think we're good.
All right. See you guys.
Thanks.